the leader of Build One South Africa, Mmusi Maimane, will chair the Standing Committee on Appropriations. Dr. Zwelini Mkhize will lead the Portfolio Committee, Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs. Now, the new Standing Committee on Appropriations chairperson, Mmusi Maimane, joins us now for more on that conversation. Good to have you, and thank you very much for your time.
Good evening, and good evening to fellow South Africans. Thank you so much for having me.
Your key stakeholders would be Treasury mostly, of course, the departments and other entities as well that you would need to deal with. Now, I would remember in your days on the steps of Parliament, every time the budget would have been presented there in the National Assembly, had a lot to say about the budget and making sure that the allocations meet the requirements, or at least what the need is. Now it's going to be you as that chairperson in your committee who's going to be in charge of making sure that we certainly do get that. It's a challenge.
It is an absolute challenge, but a challenge I take up really eagerly, looking forward to it. I think the Standing Committee on Appropriations has such an important duty to do, given that it's in your finances that you express your fiscal framework. It's in the way you disperse funds that tells South Africans where your priority areas are. And given that we are in a new era of the GNU, it's going to be important that that accountability focuses itself on what initiatives do we do around job creation, how do we ensure that our kids are educated, and ultimately, how do we ensure that whatever the appropriations are put towards those are in fact spent in the best ways possible? And I think another key stakeholder coming into this is obviously this particular committee has also got a strong arm in looking at what public interests are. And so I'm looking forward to various bodies to be able to make their submissions to various budget items that asks the questions: are we spending enough on healthcare? Are we spending enough money on youth employment? And so I really am wanting to take an activist approach to appropriations, to say, let's go into communities and let's begin to understand what their interests are as far as they want to see in the budget, rather than it being just one line in the minister's speech during the budget address.
Bailout's going to be a big issue for you, I would presume, because that's particularly one of the things that you're going to need to be looking at as a key focus area.
Yeah, certainly one of the legacy issues that remain from last year is the Eskom debt relief. And so that's one aspect. What we also need to look at what some of the state-owned enterprises do and how we certainly look at the appropriations that go towards them and accounting for them, so that this doesn't become standard practice. But I also do think that when I look at the midterm budget expenditure framework that is coming up in a few months from now, it's going to be important that we look quite carefully in an economy that's under severe strain, where many South Africans are unemployed. What are some of the levers you can use to be able to ensure that there's more disbursement of funds that look after citizens rather than look after politicians, given the fact that we now probably have one of the largest cabinets now I've seen in living memory, with deputy ministers, security, all of that. If you prioritize expenditure towards that, you can be assured that that's money taken away from a school, a clinic, certainly an opportunity for work already. I've been engaging and looking at seeing what amounts are we spending in departments like trade and industry, because those become crucial in looking after and making sure that we actually are stimulating job creation. So these are going to be crucial issues, not only just looking after the debt relief packages, but also looking at some of the budget cuts and where government uses its ability to cut. And so I also have respect for Minister Enoch Godongwana in the finance department cluster, and I'll be looking forward to engaging him, as I will all the other officials, whether they're in Treasury and the various departments within that particular cluster.
I'll come to some of the emerging challenges in terms of those engagements. But having gone up on the ticket of a job in every home, one would say we'll be looking closely to see if you are going to fight for the allocation for the Jobs Fund.
No, completely. I mean, the Jobs Fund is but one area, but there are other issues that, for example, one of the legacy issues you can appreciate is whether or not government has an ability to pay micro enterprises within the 30-day period. It's certainly something that as a committee, I think we can find unanimity on, that you can't run a business in South Africa, trade with the state, and have to incur the costs of a government that cannot pay you on time. And so this is one of the issues that, for example, other than looking at what we spend on the jobs fund, but also just the efficiencies once money has been appropriated, and why is the spending not happening? The other issue that, of course, as an interest of study personally, is looking at the efficacy of local government, because certainly local government is where the rubber does in fact hit the road. So if you are going to make a business, you're going to make it happen. You want to be able to make sure that your local municipality is able to disperse funds that are used to stimulate their economy, that are used to ensure that the roads outside your business are working well, that there's electricity and all of that. You, as a citizen of Johannesburg, none of us can deny the fact that in as much as we can lament, we can celebrate the length of period without load shedding, but we can also reflect on their traders sitting in Soweto right now, who for them they're without electricity, and therefore speed points don't work, payment points don't work, and ultimately if they do business with the state, there's sometimes delay in payments. So these are some of the issues that at a granular level, it can't just be the broader fiscal issues or macroeconomic issues. It also has to come down to the granular that says to us, how do we make it easier for that person who takes a risk, starts a business, employs someone, that they get paid on time, and that we can ensure that they have a municipality that when it has consumed services from them is also paying them on time.
So here are some of the legacy issues that you are adopting based on their report of the sixth administration. Insufficient time to process money bills, one. Two, insufficient time to have meaningful public participation in these processes is a big concern that they're raising.
Yeah, and that's part of one of the work that I've requested a meeting certainly with National Treasury, because these reports are tabled by Treasury. And so I want to request that not only does the committee get given enough time to process such reports, but it also that we give meaningful effect to what public engagement looks like. You know, part of our broader framework of governance is that the public must be put at the center of it. And in fact, often public consultation is a tick box exercise. So one of the things that I'm hoping that we can get back into communities is to give them the time to be able to make meaningful inputs, and for those inputs to be genuinely considered. You know, when you have institutions, for example, that look at issues like TB, which is one of the legacy issues that you'd had a look at, given the transition in the sixth administration to NHI, what does that mean in the funding towards TB? What does it mean towards funding towards youth opportunities? So all of these programs may seem distant and remote, but there are vulnerable citizens that are impacted by them. And also for us as a committee to be ignorant of those issues would really render us ineffective. And so I really want to get the particular committee with a very enthusiastic group of members. I must say I'm privileged to be able to serve with such incredible South Africans, some of them even from various parties, also residents that come from Soweto, that come from communities that are vulnerable. And so we really want to make sure that at the end of the day, whilst the GNU gets on with its job, we can make sure that the 60 million South Africans are well represented in the hallways of Parliament.
Here's one area that I suppose you're going to have serious trouble with Labour in dealing with, a public sector and provincial wage bill. It's huge, and it's going to be a challenge, especially now with an even bigger cabinet because of the Government of National Unity, to make a case to Labour to say, well, we've got to cut here, when essentially the cabinet is bigger and taking a little bit more.
Yeah, look, the issue of, if you like, looking at how we deal with a public service wage bill is both a function not only of head count as to how many people actually go into the doors of government, but it's also the issue of how we remunerate people at senior levels. There's been a legacy challenge, and I'm looking forward to engaging this further, that sometimes the higher people go in government, the more they are and the more paid they are, but the less work we're getting out of it. So the labor issues and the union issues don't always pertain to the policeman, the home affairs person, or the teacher, or all of that. They sometimes pertain to people higher up in various departments whose productivity levels are low. And so we've got to look at that and make sure that the state isn't bloated at the top with a lot more people who are paid a lot more without the sense of productivity that we need. So it's one of the issues that rather than saying, let's talk to the ordinary, and I don't want to call them ordinary people, but in the sense that the lower worker, the worker who's a policeman, who's at the coalface of it, let's rather not focus on there at the starting point. Let's really deal with it at the top, because that sets the culture of what we're trying to do. And also, furthermore, we cannot deny the fact that in the fiscal framework, where your expenditure is focused on, does it deliver the appropriate GDP growth? So at one level, you can set that your wage bill must sit at particular X, and we'll certainly speak to the Public Service Commission about that. But what are other initiatives that are productive initiatives that increase GDP growth, so that rather than also saying the pie is shrinking, let's increase it so that more and more people can participate and we can have the revenue to spend on more projects. I'm also very keen in looking, maybe in consultation with the Minister of Finance, as to what other instruments we can use to encourage South Africans in a savings culture so that we can purchase the economic growth that we need. So these are important discussions. You can't go into a campaign saying a job in every home, safety in communities, but not be able to encourage, say, South Africans to say, here's a savings culture that we can use to spend and buy more economic growth going forward.
Mr. Maimane, I appreciate your time. Looking forward to engaging with you a little bit more as you get yourself into that position. Thank you for your time.
Much appreciated. Thank you.
Build One South Africa leader, the Mmusi Maimane, the incoming chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Standing Accounts on Appropriations.